Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Getting on Canadian Shelves Working with Retailers and Distributors webinar. My name is Macy Duplessis, and I am the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at SUSTA. Today, we have with us Andre Lapine, the President and Founder of Premier Marketing. Fernando, he's going to join on a little later. He's having some issues with his Wi-Fi, but we will have Fernando Ramirez, the founder of World of Chia, and we also have Laura Pixley, a Senior Director of Agribusiness and International Trade at Changemakers, who will be presenting today. So I will upload a recording of this webinar as along with the PDF presentation that is shown throughout this webinar. I will upload that to the website and send out an email to everyone once it has been uploaded, just notifying you guys that it has been uploaded. So you guys can refer back to it whenever you would like. So we do have some more people that are coming in, but please hold all questions until the end. There will be a Q&A, and you guys are welcome to put them inside the chat or put them in the Q&A box. But if there's nothing else, Andre, you can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I thought I'd start by sharing a little bit about my history, my experience in the food industry, which is 40 some years. They may have chosen me because I've been in the industry for a very long time. And I have gathered experience not only in CPG in multinationals, but also as a broker and as a business development resource for various companies. I've worked with USDA organizations like SUSTA, Food Export, WSADA for over 20 years. And it's a pleasure to share this information with you on getting onto the Canadian shelves. To work with retailers and distributors, and hopefully you'll gain some knowledge, a better understanding of the Canadian marketplace. I've gone into a little more detail. The presentation can serve as a reference as well. I won't spend a lot of time on all the detail in every slide, but it will give you some context and perspective on the Canadian marketplace. So I'll start with the quick agenda. If my presentation will allow me to scroll down. There we go. So I'll have a look at the Canadian grocery landscape in general, talk about the major players as retailers in the industry, some of the other regional and national players. And to help you better understand the market, I think it's relevant to know a little bit more about the population, the distribution of the population in Canada, specifically the demographics in the GTA, which is Greater Toronto Area and the Golden Horseshoe, which is where the majority of our population is based, and the majority of the consumption and disposable income, and essentially the bigger part of your opportunity in the market. So I'll get into some trends, opportunities, the challenges, and then more detail on the topics I was asked to cover, which is the difference between retailers, distributors, importers, brokers, choosing the right path, building the relationships with those partners, and also how to pitch to them. And lastly, what mistakes to avoid. So beginning with the Canadian landscape for retail, the Canadian marketplace is dominated by about three major retailers, three giants, and we'll get into those briefly, and a few others. So if looking at the marketplace in general, there are three major companies that dominate market share. They are Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro. And they account for presently about 60% of the retail business and market share. And then you have Costco and Walmart. So the total 5 companies that are listed here represent about 75% of the Canadian retail marketplace. The other 25% are divided amongst independents. So looking at Loblaws very quickly, they have about 2,400 locations. They're operating several mainstream banners and some discount banners. I won't go into too much of that detail. I'll just leave that information for you as a reference. But they are spread across the country nationally. Their mainstream banners are Loblaws, Real Canadian Superstores, Zayres, Provigo, Atlantic Superstores. They have your independent grocers, and they also have a concept called Fortinos. They also are a major player, and dominant player, I should say, in the pharmacy. They own Shoppers Drug Mart and Pharmaprix, a couple of other, you would call them the drugstore segment of the marketplace. They also have gone into ethnic, which a chain called T&T, which I did not note in the slide. The second major player is Empire Company, known as Sobeys Inc. They have about 1,500 locations. They have a discount banner called Fresco. And then their mainstream banners across Canada are Sobeys, Safeway, IGA, and Thrifty Foods. The third player, Metro, a major player in Ontario and Quebec primarily, with almost 1,000 locations. They have a discount banner called Super C and Food Basics. Main banners are Metro, Metro et Moi, Food Basics I mentioned with the locations, and they're also in the drug segment with about 400 stores in Quebec under the Jean Coutu brand. Then we have Costco. You're all familiar with Costco. They have 110 locations. They have 2 buying offices, one in Western Canada and one in Ottawa, our national capital. Then we have Walmart with over 400 supercenters. So these cover the 5 major players, accounting for about 75% of the market share. Then we have other players, major national and regional players. Canadian Tire is known as a department store for hardware and just about everything under the sun. And they've introduced a concept called Marketplace. So they're now a player in the grocery sector with about 170 locations. And keep in mind, all these numbers are approximate. Then we have Whole Foods and approximately 40 locations. Farm Boy, which is a very rapidly growing chain in Ontario, and they're at 51 locations at the moment. And then Giant Tiger, independently owned, a very fast-growing retailer in Ontario. They have some locations in Western Canada as well, which is kind of split between their business in Ontario and Quebec. And regarding some of the regional players, looking at the Western Canada, we have Save-On Foods, which is part of the Pattison Group, Federated Co-op, the Northwest Company, and you can see those banners and the details you can review when you have some time. We can't overlook the drugstore, dollar store business in Canada. We're seeing a lot of growth in dollar stores with the challenge in the economy. Many people are shopping for consumables and food products in the dollar store segment. So we have Dollarama, which is the major player in that segment, and they have over 1,500 locations. And what's significant about dollar stores is the growth that they're experiencing over these past years since pandemic, since the economy has been more challenging. In the market with Dollarama, they're almost at a 13% growth rate. So before I jump into that, what's significant about this, it allows you to understand where the opportunities are across Canada. And the other segment we haven't talked about, which is also growing, is the national, mostly regional, but some national good for you concepts, better for you concepts, healthy food concepts. They're usually regionally dominated. Out west, you have choice markets. In Ontario, the key players are Goodness Me, Nature's Emporium, Ambrosia, and Healthy Planet is already over 30 locations in Ontario. So it's not a segment to overlook. There's opportunity in that segment. Many people coming into the US, my experience from the US into Canada over the years, they see Canada as a huge market and a big opportunity, but in reality, it's a 41 million population base, something to the size of California, and it's very fragmented, with about 60% of it being in central Ontario. And that's where the bulk of the opportunity would be to get onto the shelves in Ontario to begin with, because the major four regions are Alberta and BC in the west, and Ontario and Quebec dominating the central Canada. So as I mentioned, 60% dominance in central Canada, and the Atlantic provinces and some of the other territories are very small markets, and it's very costly to get to those other markets. So when you're developing your business plan, that's important to keep the geography in mind. What's also very significant, people perceive Canada to be very white European, but it's 45% of the entire marketplace. There's been such an influx of immigration in Canada. The demographics of Canada are not what people perceive them to be. It's very diverse, multicultural in so many ways. And this is a chart that you can refer to that shows you the demographics. So this immigration has driven the growth in Canada, and also dictates the opportunities in the marketplace. The visible minority is now the majority in Canada. So when you're thinking of marketing to the Canadian retailers and reaching consumers, it's important to keep in mind the segmentation, the ethnic base of the population. And the other important point, number 4, is that the second generation growth, the children's coming from the immigration, are a significant and growing part of the population going forward. So this is the cultural landscape, and when you're developing your strategy, it's very important to keep this in mind. So in summary, the Greater Toronto Area is a global leader in ethnic diversity. And that drives trends, and it drives what the opportunities truly are in the marketplace in Canada. So what are the trends and opportunities? Well, the key is to offer a point of difference and a unique product to address the ethnic market with some new flavors. The health benefits of products are very important. People are looking for functional foods. Fiber and protein seems to be the hottest trend coming into the new year. Gut health continues to be very key with prebiotics, probiotics, and perhaps Fernando will talk a bit about that after. He's an expert in this field, fermented foods. And convenience is always key for consumers in this day and age. And that's been the case for a number of years, but it continues to be a very strong factor. So what are the challenges? Unfortunately, since the trade wars began, there's been a movement to buy Canadian. It's a very strong movement. I think that should soften a bit, but at the moment, that's your biggest challenge. Then we get into some of the more economical challenges, which are the logistics to move product across Canada. Distribution costs from coast to coast, given the geography, is quite expensive. Bringing product into Canada, especially if the quantities are not in container loads, you have some significant freight costs. The exchange rate at $1.36 is a big factor. Trade spending requirements, I think many people are surprised at how much the retailers and distributors and broker costs account for in the margin against their margin. And then you have labeling. There's a typo here in packaging costs, but the labeling requirements and restrictions are a major factor. And then, of course, marketing brands in this country is very, very costly. So there's a small population base, as I mentioned, it's 41 million, which means that the opportunities tend to be lower volumes than some organizations, companies would expect from the marketplace. So what are the pricing considerations specific to the Canadian market? It's really important for you to have a very strong margin because these following factors affect your market margin. So you need to understand your target SRP versus competition. And keep in mind that retail trade spending in Canada could range anywhere from 15% to 25% with retailers. I'll give you a few examples of that shortly. Distributor charges, upcharges could range anywhere from 25 to 35%, and they have their programs as well that add to the cost. And the retailers not so different from the United States. The retailers are looking for 35 to 50% margins depending on the category. Here are some examples of the cost. Just taking Loblaws, for example, an SKU could cost 15,000 for the chain. If you look at the various segments and the various chains under Loblaws, you see what the listing fees are for the base. Then they have their DC over and above programs, 7.5, 3.3. They have freight loading rates. They have DSD costs. Then they have programs, allowances, depending on the category. They're looking for off invoice quite often. And so it's a significant cost. As I mentioned, anywhere from 15 to 25% could be the trade spending implications with Loblaws. And it's no better on their drug side. For a national listing, a SKU could be $34,000, and it's always negotiable. You can negotiate packages, but the point is it's quite expensive to get onto the shelves in organizations with the major three. Not so much easier with or cheaper with a Loblaws than Sobeys or Metro. This is something to take into account when you're preparing your cost structure and your strategy for the market. The other challenge I mentioned was regarding labeling. So you do require a country consultant, someone who understands the CFIA rules and regulations to develop your packaging. There's some unique aspects in Canada, the metrics versus imperial. Then you have nutritional tables, which are a little different in Canada. And not all ingredients are transposable. There's some ingredients that are approved in the US and not approved in Canada. So you really do need to understand which ingredients are approved. Some organizations have their list of what they call no-fly ingredients. Bilingualism is required. That's cost, French and English on the packaging. And starting in the new year, there are some new guidelines for the labeling, and I'll show you those in a moment. So starting next year, many of the packaged foods high in saturated fats, sugar, sodium will require a black and white Health Canada front of package label. And this is new into effect. They have this in Mexico and perhaps other countries. But this is a Health Canada regulation coming into the new year, 2026. I've provided a link here that you could get from AC, which is Get Ready for Canada's New Food Labels. There's 6 key questions answered by an article in the Canadian Grocers magazine. So this is a live link that will take you to that article. But the key is that it's not just the candies and the soft drinks, but also affects other products that you might not expect. So this will be something to take into consideration. If you're working with a market expert on packaging, labeling, then that individual or company can help you with these questions. Now, coming to the questions about the difference between brokers, importers, distributors, and how to choose the right path. The market here is not much different than the United States. The retailers, depending on the strategy, are looking for private label and branded, and your choice to pursue the opportunity would be based on your capabilities and your financial resources. Private label is often, if you have the manufacturing capabilities, a lower cost entry, but then there's some pros and cons to pursuing private label. The branded business, as I mentioned earlier, is a costly one to support with the trade spending. But if you are keen on developing and holding a market share with your brand, then it's certainly something to take into consideration. You need a strong margin to support the retailer business. And as I mentioned, in terms of your retailer strategy, you could choose to enter the marketplace with the 25% of those smaller independent regional players, which will be less costly to pursue. They might create a foundation for you to be able to leverage business with the retailers at a lower cost. Once your product is in demand and established with some of the smaller regional players, you might have an easier inroad into those 5 large retailers that I mentioned earlier. In terms of brokerage, brokers are an essential cost and beneficial, especially when you're launching smaller brands coming from another country and working with independents. It's true that some distributors have key account managers. However, they have such a vast portfolio of products. Brokers can provide a little more focus to help you with the category managers and to establish your brand strategies with the various brokers and to get you established. It is another cost of doing business. As I mentioned earlier, the distributors have key account representation. They do have preferred relationships with some of the retailers. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But as I mentioned, they have many brands to represent, especially the major distributors across Canada. Importers can also be successful. Some importers also do distribution. They allow you to consolidate product into the country. One example of that is gourmet trading. They import product into a larger quantity in Canada and have partner distributors in different regions to reduce the cost of having to ship to various locations from the United States, especially when you're trying to develop business in the West. They could move product within Canada more easily because they're buying container loads from you and then redistributing the products. Distributors don't necessarily need the importers. They'll bring the product into their warehouse, but in some cases, importers can provide a value to your business. So continuing on the subject of how to choose the right path for your product, it really comes about, it's all about strategy. It really comes down to where does your product fit? What is your market strategy? Who do you want to sell through? And that requires an in-depth market analysis. And this is a marketplace where you could learn a lot through trade missions, SUSTA trade missions, participating in trade shows. The partners that you have, such as SUSTA in-country representatives, will help you evaluate the market. And it's really important for you to review and understand your competition, the product category, the type, the channels, to dictate your strategy going forward in the marketplace. There is opportunity, but you really have to plan for it because it's a costly entry. In terms of the key distributors, they're national distributors, very similar to the United States. You have UNFI, Tree of Life, KeHE, John Luca Neal, which is one of the largest and more successful distributors of late. And they have national distribution. They have vendor representatives. They help you build your strategy. And they don't necessarily have as many SKUs as a UNFI. KeHE in the United States is known to really pick your pocket. Tree of Life in Canada is a little friendlier, but they do have many brands, and they have their programs. And like many, they require a lot of attention in order to successfully drive your business to the major retailers. Then the new one who's acquired a number of regional players now is Purity Life. They've become a national player. Traditionally, they were very much into cosmetics and supplements, and now they're moving more into the food space. So the other question I was asked is in terms of building relationships and partnerships, how do you navigate expectations? Having worked with numerous companies, I know that communication and planning and strategizing requires a team approach. There's a lot of information to be gained from those discussions. And in order to be successful, you really have to be present and consistently involved in your business and in the marketplace to move at the speed that you need to move to make the decisions you need to make in order to be successful. As I mentioned, you need to support your business with trade shows and key account presentations, working with your brokers and working with the distributors and retailers directly. It's important to be transparent. Product assurance level issues are costly. Price increases are not easily managed into the system. So you need to be very transparent in order to communicate reasons for price increases. You need to communicate any upcoming issues with product assurance or shortages. And also have a mindset of always improving, looking for ways to improve how you do business in the marketplace. And lastly, I think it's important for information sharing to understand trends, what you're working on in terms of product development, what what are the innovations that are coming through your R&D department? Discuss those with your in-market team, whether it be brokers or retailers. These are all key points to help navigate expectations and grow your business. The next piece is in terms of the keys that need to be in your presentation. It's important to communicate your story. Touching people's heart with your story and your passion is a very important aspect of your presentation, showing that you understand the opportunity and the market. The presentations need to include, product description, providing samples, why your product is different, how it's unique. One of the most important aspects is to show that you're market ready. You could bring mock-ups if you don't have finalized pricing, but the retailers and customers need to know that you are going to be market ready. They need to understand your timelines. You can share current trends and your successes in your respective markets. You need to understand your numbers, the SRPs, the margins, and how you're going to make your product successful. You have to demonstrate that you have strong capabilities in terms of spending and supporting your brands with budgets. And you have to have a solid distribution strategy. The retailers will be looking to understand how you're going to get to market, what your team looks like in the country, what your warehousing strategies are if you're working through a 3PL, through a distributor, etc. Some retailers you could sell direct to warehouse, but you do need a strong team if you're in a warehouse to get your product on the shelf and off the shelf. As part of your presentation, showing a 3 to 5 year plan of your brand and your business and where you're going as a company is important. And also demonstrating your capabilities and resources to scale your business. Those are all key aspects of your presentation. At the end of this document, I've added a small slide that I pulled from a presentation that was made by our trade commissioner offices in Ontario a month ago. So it's just a reference slide, but they went into a more detailed approach on planning for the first presentation and what should it contain. So now lastly, getting into some of the common mistakes, getting into the Canadian retail space. And this is an important slide because many companies underestimate the cost of doing business in this country. I've touched on the various costs involved. There's also a tendency to overestimate the opportunity with Canada being a small and diverse and geographically spread market, thinking that the opportunity is bigger than it is. And there's a reality check that happens at some point, but it's important not to overestimate the opportunity. It takes more time to get to market that many people don't understand. You have to wait for the calendars and planograms in order to get onto a shelf. The listing program process and the packaging development takes time. So it could take a year to get onto a shelf. And that's not uncommon in the US either. You can't assume that the tastes and the trends are the same as the United States. As I mentioned earlier, the ethnic diversity in Canada, the cultural, you want to call it mosaic of what the GTA is. Canada is very different. It's more European than American in terms of taste profiles, but it's all more globally ethnic. And in Canada, you'll find that the business seasonality has a big impact on sales. And it's important to understand the seasonality of your business in the country. There's a loyalty to the Canadian private label brands. They're less costly. The consumers have a lot of confidence in the retailers. The retailers support their brands. They claim and they deliver a good quality, a high quality in their private brands. Consumers know that. So if you're trying to develop a branded business, it's important that you understand, especially if you're competing against a private label, that it will be a challenge, but it's still an opportunity because you have something special, obviously, in your brand. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking it forward. And existing brand loyalty is established, but pricing is still a key driving force of success in the marketplace. So just concluding message on getting products onto the shelf. It's important to plan, to be strategic, to choose the right team, the right partners in the marketplace in order to succeed. And I can't stress enough that Canada is a very diverse market, very wide geographic market. You'll tend to have your success in central Ontario, where it's more cost effective to get into that market, and working likely with independents to build a foundation to get on their shelves first. And so I want to thank you for your time and open it up to questions. I don't know if we're getting into questions now or if Fernando will speak first, but you're welcome to share your questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We will go ahead and do questions after we hear from Mr. Ramirez. So if you guys have anything, you guys are welcome to go ahead and pop it into the Q&A or into the chat. And after Mr. Ramirez goes, we will then go ahead and move on into the question and answer, okay? So Mr. Ramirez, you're muted right now.
Sorry, got it. So hi, everyone. It was a great presentation, Andre. Very interesting. You really covered all points needed. I think this is the best presentation I have seen for the Canadian market, so it's great. So what I am here to talk is about our experience in the shelves as an American exporter. We started selling in Canada in 2016 through Tree of Life. I guess the reason why we started, it was easy for us, the starting process. And I guess the reason why is Tree of Life was very actively searching for more natural and healthier brands. So that is one thing that we were lucky. We found them, we were showing at that time at Expo West, and we met them. Same time that we met Costco Canada. So we started with both at the same time. The start was simple. It was just the challenge of the labels, of course, and also the challenge of incorporating a Canadian production in each of our regular US label production. So that was a little challenging. We manufacture jams made with chia instead of pectin. So it's a more natural and healthy alternative to normally sugary or not so good for you product. So we're bringing an innovation there with chia. So we try to make more natural and healthier products with chia. So basically that is, I think, what helped us get in. We at that time we were using a co-packer in Oregon, and normally our production runs were based on 1,600 pounds kettle runs. So it was a little challenging at first when we didn't have volume to label part of that in US labels, part of that in Canadian labels. So I think that is something very important to consider because that could affect your productivity. But that was one of the challenges, and of course taking the time and money investment to develop the labels. So we started with smaller accounts through Tree of Life. We went to more regional accounts. We started with Whole Foods as well, which has a very small footprint in Canada, and with a few accounts from Safeway that also is present in Canada, but also very small. And then we started working with Metro. That is where our volume started ramping up. And of course, that was on the East market in Canada. And then when we really hit, I would say, a good point in terms of cell development was when we were able to get into Sobeys, because Sobeys has a much wider, not only store count and maybe consumers buying the product, but they also have banners that are more suited to our product, more on the natural side of things. So I think that helped a lot, and our sales start to grow. And our problem was that after the pandemic on 2021, our co-packers started having issues, and we were not able to produce during 2022. So unfortunately we lost Tree of Life, and we lost the account because we were not able to supply. Then we moved to Texas, and we are manufacturing in Texas since then. But of course, it was 1 year without production for us. So that was the reason we lost. But if we look back and we have, now that we're going back again to the market, we are doing in a very different way. So when we look back at the things that we did right, we did wrong, and how we would be doing things better than we did in the past, I think one very important thing is to provide the right context on what you're doing when you're exporting to Canada. So as Andres specified, the Canadian market is, in terms of population, is same size as California, but in terms of GDP, it's almost half. It's around 60% the GDP of California, so it is considerably lower. So that is something that is very important to consider. Another thing is, Canada is like a natural first step market for a U.S. exporter, because I think it's the easier market, is very similar, although there are many differences in terms of demographics, population, economics, but it's more similar to the U.S. So it's much easier to export to Canada than to export to any country in Asia or Europe or even Mexico. Mexico, I would say, would be the second country. It has it's a good mix to export to Canada and also Mexico. But I think that is something very important to consider. I think it's a market that I would say is perfect to be your first export market. One of the, I would say, mistakes, but of course we didn't have the option to decide. Tree of Life was not the right distributor for us, because Tree of Life, although at that time they were searching for more natural products, basically their customer base and the whole system they handle is for grocery, is for mainstream products, not natural and healthy products. Although they were really working hard to develop that area, and they did it well, but still, I think having a natural product like ours, it would make much more sense to go with natural distributors. It could be one, or it can be several regional. And of course, I think that having, as Andres said, a consultant in Canada, or a general broker, or a partner in Canada that will help you with those decisions and with the proper strategy is key. And that is one of the reasons we are now working with Andre to really come back to the Canadian market with the right foot. So I think that is very, very important to mention. Of course, the labeling aspect is very important. And now it has changed. It's a little bit more complex than before. And in terms of a strategy, I think for us, it made a lot of sense to sell to Costco and at the same time to retail, because from the cash flow perspective, even though Tree of Life is part of KeHE, and as Andre mentioned as well, KeHE is very tough on your pocket here in the US, terribly, I would say. Tree of Life is not that much. Of course, it's complex, but it's very different. In our experience, it was very, very different. It's still expensive, but very clear and open, and I would say more honest than how KeHE managed their business here with the vendors. But in terms of cash flow, definitely selling to Costco helped a lot, because that is basically a good cash flow business, very straightforward. Of course, it's difficult to get in because they don't have many SKUs per category. But for us, it played a really nice strategy having both of them together. We decided from the beginning not to get into Loblaws because of exactly what Andre mentioned. It's extremely expensive on getting their your product. I mean, the slotting fees, and it's really outrageous. So later on the process, we decided to go with them on a private level project that we ended up working with Metro as well. So I think if not able to get into Costco, I think business mix where part of your business is done on private level that will generate cash, especially on accounts that you cannot get with your brand because it's so expensive. And then having your brand in other type of retailers that are more easier to get in and to maybe promote your product or develop your brand. That would make sense because that would take care of your cash flow, which is something very important when you are trying to get into a new market. You have to establish a very good strategy in that sense. I think that is what I can mention. Andre and we are developing a very interesting partnership, and I think that is one of the most important aspects on our coming back, because we are now not only looking for new distributors, but also new ways of doing business, especially now that we have so much uncertainty on the tariff wars and on the general geopolitical situation. So what we're doing right now is we're taking advantage of established capacity in Canada, and we are looking to develop a co-packer in Canada as well. We are in conversations for that right now, thanks to Andre and his contacts. And of course, it makes sense using local fruits in Canada, and then that will help us pull our product made here in the US. So I think, and we have done the same in Mexico in the past. So that I think is a very interesting strategy that I think, of course, maybe not all of us can develop, but in our case, since we are co-pack based and we are very strong on the supply side, on the supply chain, that is a very good strategy for us. And also, as I explained before, having a partnership is fundamental because then you can fine tune your strategy much better, and then you can have many more different channels that you can take advantage of to get into the market. Also, Andre mentioned about fermentation. So we are definitely working on new projects related to fermentation. And if any one of you would like to learn more about it, although it's not the subject of this conversation, I would be happy to talk to you. I think my presentation or my conversation would be about it, about my experience there, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramirez. Now we will go into the part of Q&A. If you guys have any questions for either Mr. Andre or Mr. Ramirez, you guys are welcome to go ahead and pop those in the Q&A. Right now we have one. It says, how beneficial would it be to register as a non-resident importer for the Canadian market? I think this one's for you, Mr. Andre.
Well, the best I can say to that is it depends on the product and the category. I don't think you need to be a registered importer to bring product into the country. You can work with an existing importer and have the opportunity to leverage their contacts and their networks without having to start building something from ground zero.
I would like to add to that question. So if you are really planning on getting yourself into Canada and you selling into Canada and you developing your own infrastructure, I think that's a good idea. But if you are not planning on doing that and you will do your business through an importer or through distributors, then I don't think that's a good idea, because when you do that, then you get responsibilities. Then you have to report on a yearly basis. You have to get your accountants. You can do that, but you get those additional responsibilities, which it depends on your strategy.
Thank you, Fernando.
Yes. So another question that we have is, could you offer any insight into CFIA requirements?
Certainly, I can provide the website that's very clearly stated what the requirements are. And I believe Laura might have a list of companies that provide services to help make your labels and you're compliant to CFIA.
Yes, we can share a list with Macy afterwards, and Macy, if you don't mind adding that to the email that goes out to everyone.
Yes.
There are specific labeling consultants in Canada that can help with all of the CFIA requirements and all of the CFIA regulations for formulations and anything else related to the laws in Canada. So we'll share that with Macy after this.
So another question that we have is, can I just use a bilingual label in the USA, or did I need an English only label and a separate bilingual label?
That's an easy one because you do require French and English compliant labeling. Retailers will not list product. You're not going to be approved by CFIA to import products that's not fully compliant.
But I will add to that.
You might want to, Fernando or
Yeah,
Laura.
I think the question is related to your maybe productivity in terms of your production. I think one of the challenges of the bilingual label is, in our case, that we have a lot of claims and information, that we have a lot of things that we need to communicate the consumer. So communicating them in English and French is very complicated because you have like half a space. And using that, I mean, if you want to use that and also sell in the US, I think it would be a very busy label. I wouldn't suggest that. I think the best idea would be to have one in French and English and one in English for the US. I mean, that's my recommendation. Unless your product is simple. If it's so simple and then you don't need a lot of communication, then maybe you can do that. I mean, it's not against the law to have French characters in your US label, as long as it complies with the regulations, of course.
Yeah. We also have, if I'm going to be living in Canada part-time, should I set up MFG in Canada to complement my USA co-man or import from the USA? What's more cost effective?
I can jump there if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to.
What we're doing there, it depends. It depends on where your ingredients are coming from. But in terms of our strategy, I would say it's more cost effective in general, because of course you are manufacturing in the market where you are selling. But it depends on the capabilities, because you don't have the same capabilities in the US as you find in Canada. In our case, fruit is the main component. So the fruit that you find in the US is very different than the fruit in Canada. For example, for raspberries, the best raspberries are exactly in the border between Canada and the US, but on the western side. So, for example, in our case, there is a particular berry, Haskap, which is a type of blueberry that is grown in the eastern Canada region. There are also you can do a great jam there. So it makes sense to make it there. Strawberries doesn't make sense to make there. It makes sense to make in Texas, in our case. Saskatoon berries, for example, which is a very local berry and very traditional one. It makes sense to make a jam out of that fruit. So it depends on that. That's something that you have to run, and it's very variable. But I think the message here is what complements both. I mean, having both productions, I think, make you a very good proposition to your customers, because you are telling your customers that you are local also, and there are many, many benefits regardless of the pure production costs. So that's my
Thank you, Fernando. If I may add to that as well, some considerations. And the point really is key, that where do you source your raw material? In order to continue to receive support from SUSTA, you need to have 51% US content. So you have to look at the compromise, because the idea is to kind of drive US product and resources and ingredients into the Canadian marketplace in order to continue to receive the support. But at some point, there's a calculation that needs to be made. What is the most cost-effective way to market? Because you are essentially building your brand, your American brand, in the Canadian marketplace. And if you could take your raw material in a concentrated form and ship it to a co-packer, we did that a couple of years ago. A hot sauce manufacturer in the United States was sending the concentrate to a Canadian co-packer, and the Canadian co-packer was bottling it to improve on the efficiencies, to make it more cost effective, not to move bottles, and to have a more costly or cost effective price to market. So there's different considerations. It depends on the product, and to Fernando's point, where are the raw materials coming from?
Thank you so much, guys. Are there any other questions? If you think of anything, you guys are welcome to go ahead and put them inside the chat or in the Q&A. We will now have Laura go ahead and tell you guys about some upcoming events that are going on in Canada this upcoming year.
Thanks, Macy. So one event in particular that we'd like to highlight, which we feel is the most relevant for this group, is CL Canada and the Buyer Box program, which SUSTA is organizing next year. CL Canada is taking place in April in Montreal, and it is the largest food-focused trade show in Canada. SUSTA will have booths available within the USDA pavilion, and all of the information is already on SUSTA's website, so you can have a look and see about the dates and the cost. But this is a really good show for companies who are looking to enter Canada or looking to grow in Canada. It attracts a range of buyers and brokers, retailers, importers, from the smaller regional retailers to the large national retailers and everyone in between. So CL Canada is a really good starting point, and also because it's a USDA indoor show, there's a lot more resources behind it. So we wanted to share that with you. In conjunction with CL Canada, we're also operating a Buyer Box program. So if you don't have the time or resource to exhibit at CL Canada, you can ship your product up to us, and it'll be assembled into buyer boxes and then shared with brokers and importers, distributors, retailers, etc., all across Canada. And then virtual meetings will be set up with the participating companies. And you can participate in that as well as CL. So it's kind of a custom option based on your interests and availabilities, but this is really targeted towards the consumer packaged goods industry and products that will be on grocery shelves in Canada. In addition to that activity, we have 4 other activities scheduled for Canada next year. All of those activities are on SUSTA's website and cover a range of industries from horticulture to food service to fresh produce to beverage alcohol. So if you are interested in doing more in Canada, please have a look at SUSTA's website for the other events that are taking place in 2026.
Thank you so much. And you guys are again able to filter what areas you guys are looking for events. If you guys go on our event search page on SUSTA.com, you guys can go ahead and check and change the region and go ahead and see all of the events that are upcoming in Canada. I will also be attaching the information for CL Canada and the Buyer Box program in the email as well. So it'll definitely be filled with a lot of information, and will be sent out before 3 p.m. today, so Central Time. So if anybody have any last minute questions or anything for our panelists who've done such a great job? If not, that is all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much to everyone who go ahead and did a presentation or spoke with everyone. We really appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me, or I will also attach the link for in-country consultants, so you guys can schedule those meetings if need be. So, but other than that, thank you guys so much and have a good rest of your day.
I just want to add one quick thing. I met Fernando in a virtual meeting through the Buyer's Box. And I encourage everyone to try the World of Chia products. Delicious and nutritious products for all the right reasons.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.
You too.